Hey everyone, a real quick intro to the recording of our May 7th virtual meetup. Our sponsors for this event were ZScaler and Forescout. Their generous donations allowed us to provide almost 15,000 meals worth of funding to Feeding America West Michigan, a local food pantry. Amazing discussions and presentations. I know you're going to love this one. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you again real soon.
Thanks. So can everybody hear me, see the slides? Any challenges there? Are we good there?
Oh, looks good. Thank you.
Great.
Awesome. Okay. So it's really nice to talk with you today. I am Director of Transformation Strategy with ZScaler, what it says on the label. And I've been there about 3 years, really focused on our Zero Trust and particularly our private application access solution. Prior to that, I was 14 years with NetScreen/Juniper Networks/PulseSecure, doing firewall, VPN, and NAC type work. And before that, I was with a couple of different enterprise environments, Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina, a contractor for the US EPA. So I've been both on the enterprise side of the house, but more recently really focused on the vendor side. And the one through line in all of this is connecting users to applications, you know, securely, transparently, seamlessly, flexibly, all of those great things that we look for that are sometimes hard to accomplish. So what we're really seeing is in the 20 plus years that I've been in the industry, there's been a real shift in how we do things. When I started out at Blue Cross Blue Shield, we had a data center. We had some cold spare capacity at another site. The vast majority of our users were on premise. We had a few mobile users like nurses who would go to a patient's house to do assessments, or IT people coming in over the weekend like me. But the majority of data was on-premise, the majority of users were on-premise. And the big shift that's taken place over that 20 years is obviously the change that cloud and mobility has forced upon us, where now you've got users everywhere. I'm currently in my home office in North Carolina, and we've got even more of that now with the lockdown and the work from home. We've got the rise of BYOD and the shift in applications from the data center to the cloud. First with software as a service on these publicly accessible resources, and then with infrastructure as a service or platform as a service for applications that we don't want to publicly expose. So I'm sure everybody has lived this along with me for the past couple decades, and you probably also suffered some of the consequences. The network security models that I grew up with, you put a fat firewall at the edge of the network, everything goes in and out of that firewall, remote users come in through a VPN. That doesn't necessarily work as well when your users have left the building and your applications are in the cloud. So we need to figure out how to provide the same or better levels of visibility and control when the protection for those workflows really has to span a much larger environment. And also the application access. People are accustomed to going to a software as a service app and getting immediate access over the internet. They don't want to be connecting in, going through a hairpin, getting slowed down, having to figure out whether they're logged in or not. So that has only become more visible with the shutdowns and the lockdowns and the shelter in place and the huge push to work from home. We are all trying to protect.
Quick question on that, and don't mind me. I represent the business from time to time, so we'll keep this interactive. Along those lines, are you seeing a larger push for the always on VPN as a protection? The whole concept.
So what we're seeing is a little more nuanced than that. What we're seeing is a larger push for a user to be able to get access to any application, whether it's an external facing application or an internal only application, and to have that traffic protected if it's going outbound, but also have the applications protected inbound. So I would say that we're not seeing a push for always on VPN specifically, because that's a technology that no longer delivers all the things we're needing. What we're seeing the push for is that a user should be able to go to an application anywhere without having to think about whether it's public or private. And the enterprise should be able to see and control all of that traffic. So that's the starting point that a lot of people start with. They go by default to always on VPN because that's what we know. That's what we've done this with before. But that tool no longer delivers what people are actually trying to accomplish, which is complete comprehensive visibility and control.
Okay, thank you.
Make sense?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I tend to be a little bit of a freight train, so feel free to jump in. So obviously, if we can't work from home, then there's going to be even more impact from the shutdown. So we've seen customers, we have a customer in Europe who went from, I think it was 40,000 work from home users to 300,000 work from home users in 6 weeks. And wow. I can't imagine. I mean, seriously, my colleague, my counterpart in Europe, we were just joking this morning that he should be on their payroll, because I think he's been on more calls with that company than he has with our company in the past 6 weeks. So ZScaler really, we feel that we have a solution that can help enable this shift to work from home based on the cloud native architecture. And as we talk with organizations, enterprises, agencies that are moving to work from home, what they're telling us is they're seeing really 6 things that they need. They need the users, like you and I just talked about, Aaron. They need the users to be able to access any application anywhere, and they want a consistent policy, and they don't want the user to have to think about how they get to that application, but they want to be protected the whole time. More and more organizations are looking to tie this into a cloud-based identity provider, because again, if your identity and access management is restricted to on-premise and you don't have as much capability off-premise, then this is really going to be a hard time for you. So personally, if I'm not the marketing person who built this slide, if I was, fast user experience would be bullet number 1, because that's the thing that we see driving, right? So we need to be able to use Teams and Zoom. We need to be able to get to resources. And at the same time, we need to be able to roll out this functionality, particularly now, with rapid deployment and expansion without having constraints on, okay, we ordered those VPN appliances, but they won't get here for another 6 weeks because everyone is trying to order more VPN appliances. Visibility and troubleshooting is very near and dear to my heart. I started out as a knock monkey. And so if you can't trace a packet, then you can't help your users. And then the core and the central point is, as we shift these models of work, we need to maintain the same level of control, the same level of compliance that we've always had before. And that's really hard as you start to lose the single points of connectivity and the full awareness of where the user is going on premise.
Well, that's
so this sounds familiar? Is this what you guys are looking at?
Right.
Yeah.
Is in your slide, you have 1 through 5, and you brought up a good point that you would like to use fast user experience and bring it up to 1. And ironically, one of my forward leaders on the call, Lenny, had done a really big push for making security easier to understand and use. Are you seeing companies like yourself and other customers really starting to embrace that? Because if you can make it more transparent and you make it easier to use, then people are inherently going to be more secure. So do you see ZScaler pushing the envelope on that?
Yes, well, what we see is that we are being pushed to push the envelope on that. If we come in and offer a solution that isn't easy to use, then there's no motivation to switch to that from the existing traditional solutions. Because frankly, a traditional VPN today, honestly, the user experience on traditional VPN is like the frog in the pot of boiling water. Organizations are just accustomed to users having to deal with latency, or users having to think about whether they're logged in or not, or which VPN gateway to connect to as they travel, some of these limitations. And so they expect it from a VPN. But when we come in and say we have a cloud-enabled solution that will really provide better visibility and control, if we don't deliver perfect user experience, then we get held to a higher standard, I feel like, than the traditional VPN, because everybody's used to the limitations of a traditional VPN. But yes, rightly so. If you're going to switch to a cloud-enabled solution, then it bloody well better be better than what you have, or why go to the effort of retraining your users and switching? So that's kind of my personal feeling on it, is we have to be better. We don't have the luxury of only doing what was available before.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's great, thanks. So what I see personally is that this work from home situation is only accelerating the trend that was already happening, moving from the perimeter defense model, where you've got the edge firewall, a stack of appliances around it, URL filtering, DLP, IPS, antivirus, maybe even sandboxing. And then for inbound, you've got a VPN gateway. It's between DMZ firewalls, it's load balanced, et cetera. So you've got all your traffic going through these multiple hops. When in reality, the future is today. We have resources in all these different places. We have end users in all these different locations. It's almost that we need a full mesh of connectivity, but you're not going to get that with a network-based approach at this point. So when we look at a traditional firewall VPN, this is the stacks that I spent seriously probably 18 years of my life building, deploying, or helping other people build and deploy. And the challenge there is when you get a situation like this, it's really hard to scale elastically. The drive for users to work from home means that there is either you're backhauling all your outbound traffic over an always-on VPN, a full tunnel VPN, or you're letting them go straight to the internet and just taking the hit on what they might run into. And again, users that are accustomed to being on-premise and having seamless direct access to everything, suddenly they're working from home, everything is slower, everything's harder to deal with. So you get really a lot of frustration. And the reason for that is really that the model doesn't scale. So we just talked about that stack of inbound appliances. And for me to come into Blue Cross, and this was 20 years ago, so I am not in any way saying this is what they're doing today, but this is what I cut my teeth on, quite frankly. You know, we had a Checkpoint firewall VPN. It was running on Nokia boxes. We had StoneSoft load balancing. We didn't even have GSLB because we had one primary site. And I don't even think
one
denial
second.
of service
What is GSLB? You're throwing some acronyms out here, and we got a variety of levels of tribal knowledge here. So,
my apologies. Global server load balancing. So the idea that you don't have one data center, you have 6, and you want to distribute the load across 6 data centers. So local load balancing is distributing the load off multiple appliances in a cluster on one premise. And GSLB, or global server load balancing, is distributing traffic into multiple data centers to go through different stacks. I will do a better job of not being acronym heavy going forward.
No, I have to do it myself all the time. So I am not passing judgment on you.
He is the founding member of the acronym police squad, though. So.
Excellent. Yeah, well, and I can sound like a bowl of alphabet soup sometimes, so I have to dial it back. So for me to come into an application at that point, I was coming through a minimum of 3 hops, a DMZ firewall, the VPN, the internal firewall, more like at least 4, maybe 5 with the local load balancer, just to get to the resource in the data center. And then we started moving stuff into the cloud. So this is now Juniper. And again, same deal. We've got all these inbound appliances, but now we have a site-to-site VPN like ExpressRoute to Azure or Direct Connect to AWS, and we've got non-public applications in these public cloud providers. So the only way to get to them is to VPN into the data center, go up Direct Connect to AWS, back to the data center, and back out to the end user. And this is, first of all, it's complicated. The weakest link in any configuration is the human element. And now you've gone from having 6 appliances to configure to whatever security controls and network routing, et cetera. So it's really difficult to manage operationally. You're still connecting the endpoint to the network. At the end of the day, these layer 3 connections, a virtual private network was designed to say, let's pretend the endpoint is connected on premise. And the user experience, again, just gets more challenging. So now you have a pandemic, and all of a sudden, instead of, let's not say 20,000 and 300,000, let's say you're going from 500 to 1,500. The scale doesn't matter, but the challenge does. You need more appliances to carry your users, because when I was sizing VPN deployments, you know, we would size it for 20% more than we needed, or maybe 50% more than we needed if we really had a good budget. We would buy burst licensing for something like a snowstorm in the Northeast or a hurricane where I live in North Carolina. But those are time limited. They can only burst to the capacity of the appliance. And your bandwidth consumption goes up because not only do you have more users connecting through the VPN, but if you're doing a full tunnel VPN and capturing their outbound traffic to send it through the outbound security stack, then now everything they surf on the internet is coming back to your VPN. So the operational overhead goes up, and this is why the user experience is so poor.
Do you see?
So of course, yeah, go ahead.
One more question. I need a code word, so when I need to ask you a question, I can not interrupt you. Are you seeing performance issues with the VPNs in regards to, so you have your local files, say if you use Google Suite, G Suites, or OneDrive or anything else, you have your local drives, your local files that you're working on, and then you need to go out to that network shared drive, and there could be performance issues with that. Are you saying that with solutions like yourself, because you don't really need to go back to the network to get to certain things like OneDrive, that does help with performance issues?
Yes, hold that thought. I have a diagram that talks to that.
Okay.
So 3 slides from now, maybe 2, I can't remember exactly what I put in here. But the performance issue we're also seeing is, I was talking to a bank in Canada recently. They have so many users trying to come in through the VPN that they've got their critical users are only allowed to access the VPN between 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. And their non-critical users are accessing it between 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. So you've got the capacity constraints, you've got the challenge of these boxes are basically redlined, and then you have the hairpin-induced performance problems. So logically, we got a lot of benefit out of moving our applications to the cloud. Can we move our security model to the cloud along with it? And so if I have a VPN, I can deploy it as a hardware appliance, but I also have a virtual appliance. Why don't I just put the virtual appliance in the cloud? But you still have some of the same challenges. And the main one is the single ingress point. So you build that security stack, that inbound stack of firewall and VPN and load balancing as virtual appliances in your cloud provider, but the user can still only be connected to one place at a time on a VPN. So you've moved them out of the data center, but they're still going to have to backhaul to any application that isn't in the same virtual location as your VPN that they're connected to. So the idea is you have to scale this horizontally in your cloud environment. It's like piling up a bunch of DVD players to make a streaming service and then telling people they can only access that streaming service on one site. What we're trying to do is take advantage of a cloud model that says you don't need to come into a single point and then backhaul everywhere else. We're going to bring you into the cloud, and then from the cloud, we're going to distribute you to the backend applications no matter where those applications sit. And we're moving the protection and enforcement functionalities from a single control point to a distributed set of control nodes that can live anywhere in the cloud. So we're literally moving the function of that security stack up to the cloud, and that way we can take advantage of the distribution. Oops, and I need to plug in my laptop. Hold on one sec, sorry. I've got my cord attached vertically, and every so often it falls out and I don't notice. Layer 0 problems.
So while she's plugging in, just a reminder that if anyone besides Erin wants to talk, feel free to do so. Questions are a good thing.
Yeah, any questions at this point or on the chat? Either way is good.
We just always like to give Aaron a rough time, but he does ask good questions.
That is my job.
So what we're really trying to do then is to establish both more flexibility, more stability, and more reliability as we scale by moving that control plane off premise into the cloud and applying the controls in the path between the user and the application. So this is critical. Now you don't need to be connected to the backend network to go through the security stack. Now you're basically going to a pass-through security service. And that means the security service itself can scale in the cloud. We would never have survived COVID-19 on our services if our backend infrastructure wasn't built in Azure and AWS. So at ZScaler, our private access traffic, our solution for internal application access, our backend infrastructure traffic grew 1,200% in the first 4 weeks of the crisis. And I'm sure it's gone up more than that. I just haven't seen the latest figures. There's no way we could have do this if we were not cloud-based ourselves. So the examples here are all from March because, again, I just haven't gotten updated diagrams. But we had an organization that went from, they quadrupled their work from home users in a week, and they're ramping their way to the entire company. And then the big one out in Europe, they are currently up at 250,000 of the 300,000. So if you take this graph and extend it out for another 4 weeks, that is currently our biggest single deployment. One of the other challenges is it's not just protecting your applications from these remote users, it's protecting your users from the incredible jerk faces who've decided to leverage a public security crisis and a public safety crisis for their bloody malware. So we've seen Trojans that are delivered, we've seen ransomware, we've seen malicious sites that try to infect people's PCs for other purposes, and all of this is tagged with the kind of things that end users are searching on today. So not only has the traffic become more distributed, but the threats are really targeted at what people are scared of right now. And what it comes down to is you need to enable users to work from home as securely and as flexibly as if they were on premise. To do that, obviously, it needs comprehensive access regardless of whether it's outbound or inbound traffic. The cloud makes the solution rapidly deployable. There is no hardware to purchase. The licensing is on a per user basis, so you don't have to figure out how many devices a user has or how many applications a user needs to talk to. We need to enable not only the applications that we're used to handling for private access, but all sorts of collaboration apps, back-end apps that have never been accessed off-premise before. We have a lot of organizations that are saying we need to connect a huge amount of remote users to SAP, for example. And one of the challenges there is some of those SAP users may be employees who need other things. Others of those SAP users may be third parties. So you need to give a more broad access to your employees and a less broad access to third parties, and how easy is that to do? And of course, you have to make sure you're protecting all this traffic. So as your end users who are now sitting at home, as they surf the internet, you need to make sure they don't pick up malware from a malicious site, so nothing bad gets in. But you also need to make sure they're not leaking data out. So CASB, data leak prevention, sandboxing of potential threats, all of these things are critical. And of course, when I was at Blue Cross, again, my least favorite troubleshooting call was access to this application over the VPN is slow. Because gosh, where do you even start? I don't know if they're on an underpowered ancient Windows PC, or if they've got a modern machine, but they've got 100 tabs open in Chrome, or their uplink to their internet service provider is crap. Personally, I live out in the county and I live out in the woods, and I have water-soluble internet access. Literally, if we get a hard rain, my internet access goes to crap. So you've got to deal with all these issues. Then you get them up into the internet, and if they're accessing an internal application, is the data center congested? Is the application server busy? So being able to quickly narrow down the source of a problem is critical in making sure that you don't have a million trouble tickets as a bunch of users run into the same problem. And I noticed that there's a question on the chat, even for a single data center organization. Go ahead, Charles.
No, go ahead, Lisa. I was reading the same, so if you want to read it, that would be just fine.
Yeah, even for a single data center organization, you need to think about this absolutely, because if you need to fail over to another data center, you don't have your on-premise Blinky boxes. That is 100% correct. If we were at Blue Cross and we lost the primary data center, we had a cold standby. But you know, as much as you try to make that fully automated, the few times that we tested it, and again, 20 years ago, I'm sure things have gotten better by now, but it's a complex process and it's really easy to miss things. So virtual appliances can be replicated, but there's the question of how do you transition the traffic? How do you make sure that the configuration and the package, software packages are up to date? It can be done, and it can be done well with virtual appliances, but it's a ton of overhead. So pausing here, I think this is a great time to ask y'all some questions about your experience. And I guess the first question is anybody here open to talking a little bit about the changes that work from home have brought to your organization? Are you seeing the same kind of requirements as this?
I'm going to let some other people ask, but I definitely have some input for you, but let's see if we can get somebody else. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna pick on a couple of particular people. First, Sam, you guys are a global company, right? So what are you folks seeing on your side?
Sorry, I was making lunch, I'll be honest. What am I seeing for what?
So Dematic has been.
Do these requirements look familiar?
Yes, these look very familiar. And we actually do use ZScaler, so that's cool. So we are one of your customers.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. DLP is very important for us. All of this is important for us. Yeah, I don't really have any questions though.
Well, it was more around. You guys have a unique position where you're having to worry about like CCPA and GDPR and other things. So are you seeing a bigger push with the SaaS? And then obviously DLP is a part of that, is where I was going.
Definitely. It seems like it's a little bit difficult to manage right now. And I think it's going to change a lot in the next few years, moving more towards SaaS. But it is hard with GDPR because you want to keep everything in your control, right? And when you start having more and more SaaS, it's stuff you can't control, right? You have to make sure you're doing good vetting and risk management of your third parties that you're entrusting all of your data with. So we'll see how it changes with GDPR, but I don't know.
Thank you.
Do you know if your organization has more users under the ZP or ZScaler service than they did when you started, or were you already really rolled out to all the users that you needed to be before the pandemic hit?
ZScaler was on everyone's computers when the pandemic hit. Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
That's a really good position to be in because then you've got protection whether they sit on premise or whether they sit at home.
Yep. Yeah, that's very nice to have.
Any other comments or questions? Does this look familiar? Is there any part of this that you're struggling with in particular as you're adapting to the new environment? For anybody?
Who else were you going to pick on, Bragg?
I was actually going to call out Kevin. And Kevin, you are in a similar position to Sam, where you have multinational companies that you have to work with. Is how much of cloud to cloud visibility is giving your company fits? At least I think he was still on there. Lloyd, is Kevin still on? I thought I saw him earlier.
I think he's on here. Hey, you out there, man?
Yeah,
hey,
there you go. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about the answer to your question there, and cloud to cloud between working from home and accessing different cloud solutions and platforms, right? I'm not too engaged in those aspects in my organization from a support perspective. I can tell you from my own personal use, I'm not experiencing any personal concerns or issues there from a performance or scalability perspective, but maybe it's just me.
Well, that's a good thing. That's not a bad problem to have.
Glad to hear it, yeah. So continuing on. Oh, please, yeah.
So I want to know about ZScaler security internally as, based on the topology. I know you guys are going to call it a cloud access broker, but I still see it as a man in the middle, essentially. So how are you guys maintaining your internal security, and how do you also handle SSL?
That's two fantastic questions. I'll tackle them in that order. So for internal security, there is security of our cloud and security of your data. So for outbound traffic, that's generally open internet traffic that's transiting the internet anyway. So we have a variety of certifications for our cloud infrastructure. ISO 27001, we are FedRAMP moderate certified for our outbound service, and we're FedRAMP high certified for our inbound service. And we do have dedicated clouds for the government, but the code is at the same level of security on both sides. So if you're running in our inbound service, you have the equivalent protection as if you were running on a FedRAMP high solution. It's just on our commercial cloud. That means there are all sorts of restraints about who can log into what machine on the back end, two-factor authentication. For our inbound service, the components that connect the end user to the application, unlike a VPN that has that inbound listener, our app connector component is an outbound only TLS connection to our cloud, and we send all the traffic back down the outbound TLS tunnel. So there's no single ingress point, so we can make these connections simultaneously to multiple environments. And there's no exposed attack surface, because literally when you deploy one of our app connectors, unless you enable SSH, it doesn't accept any inbound packets at all. So that's how we're handling the security component. Now for the security of your data, when you send traffic out through ZScaler, the organization has the ability to exempt the personal traffic. So you can say that banking or healthcare or finance is not subject to SSL inspection. And for the inbound traffic, data is never written to disk. So it's always data in transit. It's never data at rest. And if you happen to be sending traffic that is sensitive on an unencrypted transport, we actually have the ability on a per application basis to apply a layer of your PKI end to end, which means that even when that data is in memory in a cloud broker, it's never exposed to us because it's encrypted with your identity. It's TLS connection with your PKI. Make sense?
Yeah. Are you, I'm pretty sure I already know the answer to this, but are you stepping TLS 1.3 down to 1.2? And do you have a roadmap?
So at this point, we don't see a lot of TLS 1.3. And so right now we're doing a lot of bypassing of certificate pinned apps and applications that we can't decrypt. So that's something that we could set up a follow-up deep dive on for you to understand what our direction is there and how we plan to handle that as it becomes more prevalent. So that's definitely a consideration here.
All right.
Good questions. Thank you. Spin the propeller on the hat a little bit. Other questions here?
All right.
Awesome. So just charging forward a little bit, what we hear from organizations that have been leveraging Zscaler either prior to COVID-19 or under the current circumstances is one of the biggest benefits is the elasticity. We can stand up a new tenant within 24 hours of a request, and we can fast track it if your hair is really on fire. I have literally sat on conference calls where we have started with an unconfigured tenant and gotten an app connector deployed, endpoint software configured, and policies set up in an hour to get people connected to applications. We don't necessarily like to do that. Again, that was for a company that had a VPN breach and needed an immediate fix, but we can do it if we have to. The user productivity generally gets reported as improving because with ZPA and with Zscaler, users don't have to think about whether an app is public or private. And not only can you eliminate the CapEx cost of purchasing that stack of appliances, but you can replace and then upgrading it and licensing it into the future. But you can eliminate the OpEx cost of managing all those different boxes, coordinating policy configuration across data center, AWS security groups, Azure network access control, and even the logging. If you're getting 6 different log formats, and you have to correlate that to see what one user did, there's overhead in that as well.
So when you talk to the OpEx costs, you're basically saying that you could reduce your costs in regards to, you'd still need configuration, I guess is what I'm saying. But as far as like auditing and other logging processes, you can kind of stream that a little bit. Is that what you're kind of saying with the minimize the cost?
you can streamline all those things, and you can even reduce the configuration overhead, because if I have an application in the data center and then I migrate applications to the cloud, but data center is not going to disappear. If the cloud was going to kill the data center, it would have been dead 10 years ago, right?
Exactly.
So
hybrid
in most organizations, most organizations are going to have both forever. That means you're configuring policy on a data center firewall in one language. You're configuring policy in AWS security groups. You're configuring policy in Azure controls. Whereas with ZPA, you can shift to a single policy configuration that controls access to applications in all of those environments. So you're reducing the amount of time it takes to create and troubleshoot policy. And then log correlation is another thing. If you have to go to every box in a stack to figure out why a packet didn't get out or where a user went, or if you have to go to 3 different environments to see everything. Let's say somebody comes and says, this user is under investigation. Show me everything they did in your data center, in Azure, in AWS, because the one thing we've seen is that when a company starts to move to the cloud, it's not a cloud, it's multiple cloud providers.
Exactly.
They're standardized on Azure, but somebody's got a side project in AWS, or they bought a company that's in Google. So those are the types of OpEx reduction that you can see. Other questions or comments here?
Yeah, question on how you map. So if you're doing this at the application, the policy at the application layer, how do you map users to applications if you have thousands of users and potentially thousands of applications on an internal network? Whether they're manufacturing or small QA departments or things like that.
That is the $6 million question. If you had come to me when I was at Blue Cross and told me I could build policy to connect specific users to particular applications, I would have told you that was nice, but I don't actually know what users are using which applications. And if I'm being honest, I don't even know what all of our applications are. Anybody can stand up a server under their desk.
Yeah.
So, so generally people's firewalls have maybe some small amount of individual configuration, but it's primarily open connectivity. And our solution for inbound traffic is designed to give you the same flexibility. You can start off by configuring our solution for open connectivity, and then you can build the granular policies organically based on different use cases. I know this person only needs to access to these 5 apps, or I know this server only needs to be accessed by these 5 people. The thing is that when you define an open connectivity policy in our solution, your user activity logs will show you everyone who is accessing resources and exactly what they're going to. So you'll get a discovered application database, and we're not scanning your network, we're literally just watching. ZPA is tracking what applications people connect to successfully. It will give you a list of those applications, and then you can drill into any one of those apps and see who is connecting it. So it will answer both of those questions for you. Start with a pilot group of users, give them an open connectivity policy, give them a week or 2, and then go dig into, here's the top 100 apps. For app number 1, here's all the people who touched it. For app number 2, here's all the people who touched it. You can choose how to prioritize granularizing. Go ahead.
So that could potentially be another way to minimize business costs, right? Because you could use it not just as a security point of view, but like a VM or licensing auditing model, right? Are these people, do we have like a healthcare example, right? Would be, I'm collaborating with Constant Contact, or my Emmy, or, name it. Do we have the proper contracts in place? Are they allowed to send emails as us? Or do we have a BAA in place with Box, right? So you could argue that there's security components, but there's also business savings cost and auditing power right there.
Totally, and that extends beyond just your standard employee use cases to more complex use cases like third parties, but also think about M&A. You buy another company, you have no idea what their security hygiene is. You have no idea if you have overlapping IP addresses, because we're all on RFC 1918 space in the data center. So how many different 10net applications are you running? With ZPA, You have the ability to drop a connector into their environment and immediately connect specific users to critical applications. But you also have the ability to open up more broad access and see what their employees are connecting to so that you can help migrate that into your security policy. So M&A is another big place where this brings you business benefits and lets you realize the value of an acquisition faster.
Another question.
I want to be mindful of time, and there's another guy after me. Are we doing okay? Because I can do this all day.
Yeah, no, we still have 6 minutes left. We got time for a couple more questions.
Totally, let's do it.
So you do any health checking of the clients when they connect to your trust exchange, like a HIP, you know?
Yes. So there's two ways that we can incorporate device posture. One is posture that we gather directly with the ZScaler agent. And so that could be anything from on a mobile device, is it rooted or jailbroken? Is it a managed asset or personal mobile device? Or on a Windows PC, you can get anything from, is it full disk encrypted? Is the firewall enabled? We can tie into backend EDR like CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or SentinelOne. So there's a wide range of posture that we can gather from endpoints. But the other option is we can also inherit posture from a SAML identity provider. So we authorize users based on SAML. And let's say that you have a SAML IDP, you're doing multi-factor authentication, and you've got Microsoft Azure AD and you're doing conditional access. So you could set a SAML attribute based on the user's geographic location, and then you could say, I only want to allow users if they're coming from the United States, and that we inherit as a SAML attribute from the IDP. So there's a variety of posture and other contexts that we can either derive natively or inherit from the IDP.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Other questions here? So what we've seen is that, I want to go back to that single ingress point question because I don't have the slide that I thought I did. But again, my apologies. Margie told me this needed to be not a sales pitch, so I took out all the salesy stuff. But just in terms of controlling access to resources, basically what we say is we put an agent on the endpoint, or we allow users to access resources solely in a web browser. And we're going to intercept all of the traffic from that endpoint. We're going to send private access through the ZPA service, private access. We're going to send outbound access through the internet access service. And that means that the user can be directly connected to resources through our cloud, no matter where they sit and no matter where the application sits. So I may be sitting at home and I have one TLS tunnel to an internal application in the data center. I've got an outbound connection to the cloud from my endpoint. I've got an outbound connection from an app connector in the data center, and I have an end-to-end path that way. But I'm also needing access to a resource in AWS. So I've got, again, that outbound connection to the cloud from my endpoint. I get a different outbound connection to the cloud from the AWS environment, and that gives me a direct path to AWS. All of these are TLS 1.2 encrypted, and they're mutually authenticated and certificate pinned. So that means that we can deliver traffic directly to private applications in multiple locations without that hairpin. At the same time, if I'm surfing the internet, if I'm going to software as a service apps, then again, I'm coming up to the cloud, and then all the controls are being applied there. URL filtering, DLP, CASB, IPS, firewall, sandbox, and then my traffic is allowed to go out to whatever software as a service or internet resource I asked for. To the end user, this all looks the same. So they have, when they access SAP, it looks the same to them when they're off-site as when they're on-site. They type the same host name, they open the same application, they don't have to start a VPN because ZScaler is running as a service and capturing all that traffic under the hood.
So
Aaron, does that answer your question from earlier?
Yes, and I'll add one question, but I'm going to defer to somebody that was just talking. Go ahead.
So to that, you clearly are doing some things with DNS. Do you also work with your other DNS filtering providers like Umbrella or Cloudflare?
So we would be, those are really two different functions. We would be an alternative to Cisco Umbrella. So we have a DNS security service that would be an alternative there. And with Cloudflare, because they're a CDN, we would be accessing via the CDN, and they have the 1.1.1.1. Yeah, so if you're using the 1.1.1.1, it's just another upstream DNS provider. So we would still be applying DNS security there.
Good question, Anthony.
It's like using 4222 or 8.8.8.8.
All right.
All the same on the.
One last question for you, and then we'll have to switch over. What kind of performance hit does a user see?
So it really, the agent is minimal because the premise that we have is to move as much intelligence into the cloud as possible. That means we can make the connectors as lightweight as possible, and we can make the agent as lightweight as possible. So from a resources on the endpoint, all we're really doing is watching user requests and routing them up a TLS tunnel or routing them out, you know, a PAC file. Or ZApp also can use TLS for outbound traffic. So the hit on the resources is minimal. And then in terms of
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose her? Oh, she's reconnecting.
Okay. Well, that's almost good timing.
It must be raining.
That must have been that water drop.
She did say that rain would affect her. Well, it's better than the snow we might have here in Michigan on Monday.
Ugh.
Hey, can you hear me again?
There we go.
Yes, there you are.
Yeah, sorry about that. My call dropped. Unfortunately, because I'm out in the county, I don't have enough bandwidth to share slides and have computer audio at the same time. So from a bandwidth perspective, we have peering with Microsoft, for example, for Office 365, and some other direct peering relationships that can make the experience better going over ZScaler than it does going over open internet.
Okay.
And if we're looking at some organizations that have done this successfully, there's a number of different stories up on LinkedIn about different organizations that have specifically addressed COVID-19 via the ZScaler services and had a similar experience where they had a starting point and they were either already protected, as with SAM's users, or they were able to expand quickly to protect all of their users.
Excellent. Well, that's a good way to end this segment. Lisa, thank you very, very much for your time, and I'll kick it over to Matt for a big thanks on the food basket yet again.
Thank you. This was great fun.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. That was really good. We will make sure that like always, all the ZScaler information will be up on our LinkedIn page, our LinkedIn group page. If you're not connected there, that is how you become an official CSA West Michigan member. Just join our LinkedIn page. We'll probably put some information up on our Teams channel now as well, since we have that going on. But Lisa and the ZScaler team, thank you so much for presenting and sponsoring, making a difference on lots of fronts today.
Thank you.
So also, just again, so everyone's aware, we will be giving away 3 $100 Meijer gift cards at the end of the day today. I know it started off saying that it would be Amazon, but decided that we should probably support something local again. So moving that over to Meijer.
Yeah, but hopefully, if somebody. We'll have to figure something out. If you win it, and because we have more people from out of state now, if you win it and you don't have a Meijer next to you, we'll figure something out.
You have to move to Michigan.
We'll talk to Meijer.
Is Liz still on here?
You know,
Liz.
some places you should be expanding to.
Yeah. We might have some new states for you, Liz.
Yeah.
We're in 6 states. How many more do you want?
All of them.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Okay.
So a couple things before we switch over to the Forescout presentation. I am finally. I know some people have already sent me their T-shirt size and address. I have been quarantining myself out of the post office, but I am finally going to get there. So if anyone would like one of our Cloudy with a Chance of Security T-shirts, send an email to csA@csawmi.org, size and address, and I will today or tomorrow at the very latest, I promise. And everyone else that sent me that before, I will get those out to you. Anything else we have? No. I think we're good to jump right into the next presentation. So, Howie, do you want to jump in here from a Forescout standpoint and get the rest of this party going?
Yeah. Hey, thank you very much, man. We got Nick Duda with us. Nick, if you want to start sharing your screen, I'll kick this off. So, hey, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for allowing us to join you today. I really like the community feeling of this group. It feels less commencement speech and definitely more weekly glee club. So it feels comfortable. It's nice.
Weekly Glee Club. I'll take. I won't take any offense to that.
We may do hashtag Weekly Glee Club. Yeah.
It just feels very, very family. I love it. And I also I learned a lot from Lisa's presentation too, because ZScaler is right up the street from where I live here in the Bay Area, and it's led by a group of really amazing people. A lot of friends there. Well, look, we know that as we go through this COVID-19 thing, we are all staying at home. We're all faced with a different type of workplace. We have coworkers that are now dogs, cats, kids, and they just, are a big part of our lives now. And our homes become sort of an extension of the corporate workplace. We're seeing very similar trends as ZScaler, where users are going off campus. We're seeing about a 40% drop in smartphone on campus. That tells us that a majority of our users are no longer on campus. Along with that, we're seeing about a 15% drop on on-premise PC usage, as the users that can take their workstations with them start to go home. And we're also seeing a corresponding increase in users on the VPN concentrator in a data center. So it's interesting to say that, we do see an increase in VPN utilization, partly because we feel like there's going to be two types of workers, those that have most of the services in the cloud. And for those, you'll look at solutions like ZScaler. But we also have organizations where a lot of their tools, servers, simulation tools, financial data, logistic code bases, all of that continue to be a little monolithic. And the world we live in is a little, it's not as caught up as we'd like it to be. And so for some of these users, their data continue to be on premise. But rather than have us talk about our technology, I wanted to introduce a security engineer who will be sharing his experience at HubSpot in securing that extended perimeter with us. He's my good friend, Nick Duda, principal security engineer over at HubSpot, superpower user, and orchestration and automation genius, and the founder of the Forescout community. Definitely a groundwork effort there. Before I pass the baton off to Nick, I know this group hasn't been shy at all about asking questions, so just keep that up. In person, in chat, we'll get to them. And on that note, I don't want to steal Nick Duda's thunder. I introduce Nick Duda. And Nick.
Nick, you're on mute.
Let me scroll down here. There we go.
All right. Nick, you're still on mute. On the
Hello.
There we go.
There you are.
There we go.
All right. Let me, I'm dialed in on the phone, but I'm going to hang up here. Give me a second.
By the way, this picture was taken over at RSA this year, where I had just met Nick for the first time, even having worked with him for over a year. I jumped up and was like, "Hey, Nick," and he was like, "Yeah, it's Howie," and it was great. Great moment for both of us.
That's one of the best parts of RSA, actually, is getting to see people talk to you all the time and never meet.
Yep, you just kind of like clicked. It was great. So I thought I'd do the introductions. And Nick, are you back?
All right. Can everyone hear me?
There you go.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
All right. Sorry about that. I'm actually connected with computer audio. I was having a problem with my phone for some reason. So yeah, let me dive in really quick here. All right, so let me start. So I'm Nick Duda. I'm one of the principal security engineers over at HubSpot. My biggest focus as a security engineer at HubSpot and just kind of my career in general has been on the defensive side. So I stay away from like the penetration testing and the application security, and I really focus on using the different security tools that are out there to help protect the organization. And I've been a Forescout customer for, I'm not even sure now, 10 years, maybe a little bit longer. It's definitely the best tool in my arsenal. There's so much passion and love for the tool and how I use it, that I've done things like Howie mentioned by creating a Forescout Slack user community, which I'll talk to a little bit later on at the end of the presentation. And I spend a lot of my efforts in thinking outside the box with the technology and how I can do integrations with other technology, whether it's SaaS-based technology or other on-prem technology. I usually wanted to, this is a presentation that I did recently for Forescout on a webinar. So I'm going to try to go off script and talk more organically through this. So if you do have questions, I guess kind of ask them. But one of the things I like to start with is kind of how I met Howie, and we have a lot of synergy, is that when I started doing a lot of OIM integrations, which is their open integration module for integrating Forescout with other technologies, I was really focused on how I could get better visibility into our Macintosh environment. And I found this guide, this guide, I don't know where I found it, but it was, no offense, Howie, it was a very accurate guide. It was kind of all over the place. But I did find this name buried deep inside. I think it was maybe even like the source code or something that just said Howie. And I'm like, I got to find this guy and talk to him. And this is like just a quick picture of like me reaching out to him on LinkedIn randomly one day and just being like, hey, you don't know me. I'm a power user. I'm trying to get your attention. And Howie's just like, I know you, man. Let's talk. And really, Howie's the one that kind of jump-started me to just write a lot of integrations with Forescout and other platforms. So anyways, that's kind of nice. Let me kick in. Okay, so what I've put together is kind of it's at its heart. This is going to be focused on Forescout and how we're utilizing Forescout to solve these problems. But I will talk a little bit more about some other technology we're using in conjunction with Forescout, and in some cases integrating with them to solve these problems. So when COVID kind of reared its ugly head, our entire company went, for the most part, full remote. And we've had remote workers in the past, but literally all of our offices shut down and everyone just started working remotely. And that got me thinking, the rest of the team thinking about the new issues or risks that are being presented in this new day and age of everyone working from home. And I kind of bundled it down to these three individual areas. And really, the first one was, we realized, and we know this, none of this is new, but what we realized is that home networks are just not built with security in mind. Maybe for us security professionals, they're definitely better, but the average home user, routers are not secure, the bad firmware, their SSIDs not protected, with maybe some with, no passwords, no, WEP and not WPA, and, who knows what kind of IoT devices are living on those environments. And we're inviting employees, to connect their company issued machines to these now unsecured networks that we have no reach into. So we need to start thinking outside the box on what we can do there. What we also realized here was that the corporate devices that are moving off the network are not getting all the same protections as they would in the office. So like examples of that could be, we have really very powerful next-gen firewalls that are utilizing all kinds of like sandboxing and malware analysis, and proxy servers and things like that. But when you take these assets outside the office, you lose some of that. So we needed to find those gaps in those technologies. And we did find some. And then the biggest one that I find is as these assets are moving outside of our office, we need to have continuous visibility and remediation into them. And there are gaps. So for example, how we mentioned about the VPN, where our company is 9% of everything employees use is SaaS based. So there's very little reason to connect to the VPN, except for some, minor internal resources. So there's certain technology we may have inside, the company that can't talk to these remote assets. So how can we do continuous visibility and remediation into those? So these are the big risks that happened over the past couple months, and we had to kind of, again, think outside the box on how we can address these. And again, I'll mention a lot of this has to do with how we're trying to leverage Forescout to close some of these gaps. So the rest of the kind of the presentation, I'll cover the 3 areas where we're using the technology to improve on and solve some of these risks. So I'll go over some stuff related to how we're like doing better device classification and improvements within the Forescout platform for a remote workforce, you know, connecting in over VPN and as you'll see in some slides, devices that don't even connect into the VPN and how we're getting visibility that way. So I'll go over how we got richer visibility and control into those remote devices. And then,
hey, Howie, quick question around device classification. Are you seeing that as just a bigger and bigger challenge because of the remote work? Did your leadership make that a priority just because it makes sense, or you're just seeing that's just kind of an evolution of what's happening because of COVID?
Well, no, the device visibility for us has primarily been around IoT. It turns out VPN device visibility is not that hard. There's very little devices that can have an agent to do VPN to begin with. So they fall into 5, 6 very discrete buckets. It's only when you start getting into like, is it an IP camera made by Axis or things like that, when it gets really, really gray. And that's where we've been focusing a lot of our efforts on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. And then the last part I'll talk about, which is kind of my sweet spot, and I could talk for probably hours or days or weeks about all the different types of third-party technology and how we can integrate with it. So before I kind of jump into like showing you how we did some the improvements within the Forescout platform and stuff like that, we do have a lot of considerations we have to take in place immediately, right? So in order for Forescout to just do its job, we need to make sure, like, do we have visibility into our VPN subnets? And if not, that's a problem, right? We're not going to be able to have that visibility or do inspections and remediation and stuff if we can't see, you know, Forescout can't talk to the VPN subnet. So luckily, we built out our infrastructure to already have that visibility, but that is a consideration more for other customers that might be trying to achieve these kind of results to think about as well. And also, are the endpoints managed via the Forescout agent or without the agent? And you know, why that matters. And I'll cover that in a couple other slides, but there are obviously pros and cons to how fast detections happen and stuff, right? So one of the observations that I've made with remote workers in VPN, unlike the office, is in the office when someone connects their laptop or their desktop, it's on the network for long periods of time. If it's an employee's laptop, they come in, you know, the typical 8 a.m., turn their laptop on. It's probably on the network until the end of day, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So a lot of time just sitting on the network for something without an agent to be able to manage and do things with. But with the VPN, I've observed that employees will come and go from the VPN. They'll jump on the VPN, they'll do what they need to, and maybe they'll disconnect. You know, they'll close the lid and walk away and stuff. So that's where things like agents might matter more for instant visibility and instant actions. And then kind of along the first bullet is not only does Forescout have to have visibility into the VPN subnets and stuff, but can Forescout also communicate to the devices that are connecting into those VPN subnets? So
that meme is awesome.
Yeah, right. So yeah, so like the meme is kind of spot on here, saying that, you know, Forescout can see these VPN subnets, but you know, when devices go off network, and we're talking about network location awareness and things like that, like different firewall rules may kick in, where if you're using an agentless aspect, can Forescout actually, you know, do port scans against remote agents, and can remote agents, you know, the NetBIOS ports open so Forescout can talk to them, and SSH and things like that. So again, these considerations have to be taken into place before you can really do a lot of you get that visibility and control of systems on the VPN. So assuming that's all in place, and it is, one of the things I'd like to cover now is how we made improvements within the Forescout platform on things like device classification, and why that matters, or rather how that differs from on-prem classification. What can we do to improve that? And again, the point here is that devices may come and go really quick. So when they jump on the network, we need to get that visibility quick, ask these devices questions, and perform any remediation that we might need to. So the coming slides here will probably be more familiar to those that are familiar with the Forescout platform, but one of the first ways that we are improving this remote workforce visibility is by doing classification improvements. And one of the first ones we did was we separated out how Forescout interacts and classifies devices on the VPN. So
Nick, quick question.
Yeah.
Our company owns one of the Forescout. Well, it's not a device; it's a VM. But anyways, that aside, I don't remember seeing VPN as part of the options. Is that something new that just was recently added with one of the updates, or has that been there and I just never seen that option or never paid attention to it?
So when we say VPN, so as Howie was saying, Forescout sees any network that you configure it to. So as long as you have visibility into your subnets that VPN users connect to, you have that visibility. But I think more specific to what you might be asking is, Forescout does have some native modules that you can install that will interact with the VPN concentrators that you might be using. So like Cisco, and really what the meat of this presentation kind of is it goes into how you can actually write your own integrations into other VPN concentrators that you might have.
I meant like where you have the screenshot showing the scope where it says IP ranges and you have the VPN highlighted.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't remember seeing that part available unless this is in a screen that I've never seen.
No, so all I'm doing right here, and actually I'll explain the screen right here. So what I'm doing here is I'm just breaking out my my normal classification policy into a separate one, and I'm focusing on a segment that I've created called a VPN. So within the Forescout platform, you can actually create these things called segments, and all it is just logical groupings of IP addresses.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Right? Then I just probably forgot. Sorry.
Yep. So this kind of goes in. So all I'm explaining here is that most companies that deploy Forescout have a single device classification policy, and that usually is like your primary policy. You need to classify devices before you can pretty much do anything else within the platform. And again, most companies have one classification policy for every device on their network that tries to figure out, is it Windows, is it Linux, is it this, is it that, and so on. I've broken those out. And the reason why I've broken those out is to limit the sub rules to focus on the devices that are most likely to connect to the VPN. So what we're doing here is we're improving the efficiency and the speed in which Forescout can classify a device. So if you think about a traditional classification policy within Forescout, when a device comes online, you want to know, is it a Windows, is it a Macintosh, is it a smartphone, is it a mobile device? And even more, is it a Switch? Is it an Xbox? Is it a Nintendo Switch? Is it an IP camera? And what I've realized is that takes time, right? As you're going down a classification tree, it can take time to go through all those sub rules. And with a VPN implementation, you want to know right away what the device is. So what we've done is we separated them out and we said, well, Xboxes are not connecting to the VPN. So we've limited the types of checks we're doing to the devices that are most likely going to be connecting to the VPN. So I don't have a screenshot here. I wish I would have put it in here, but my normal device classification tree has something like, I'm probably up to like 50 or 60 sub rules on there. And as you can see on this one, there's only Windows, Mac, and tablets and smartphones that really connect to the VPN. So we were able to completely speed up the time when a device connected to the VPN for Forescout to perform accurate classification.
So when I asked you earlier about classification, I'll be honest with you, it was a leading question for the question I'm about to ask you now in relation to this. So when you're speaking of like network access control and you're doing that discovery phase, right? And classification becomes key, especially in healthcare, because you don't want to inadvertently knock a device off the network.
Right.
And this is where other systems, and we won't get into names because I want to keep my job, may have an issue with identifying the differences between maybe a med cart and an IoT TV, right? It's, the network card manufacturer could be the same for both of those. So how does your solution help with that, that discovery and that classification?
Yeah, that's it's like you're teeing this question up. So on one regard, I'm going to just say that Forescout has secret sauce, right? That part of what they do is they have a lot of different behind the scenes, under the hood metrics, features on how they classify a device. They're not just looking at, say, the MAC address, associating it to a certain NIC vendor and saying, oh, this is a Windows device. There's other things that they're doing to help that. So, right. But what I'm also doing to add on to that, and as I go through these slides, I think you're going to start seeing it more, is I'm leveraging other technology through integrations to be able to provide that to me, right? So aside of, say, like I'll spill the beans now on some of what I'm about to show you, is that, like, say we have a Macintosh that comes onto the network, and Forescout is trying to establish it's a Macintosh by whatever means or whatever. At the same time, I might have Forescout ask other technology we have, such as Jamf, those that are familiar with Jamf as a Macintosh management platform. Forescout saying, hey, Jamf, this MAC address just came on the network, or this IP address just came on the network. Do you know anything about this? And Jamf is like, heck yeah, I do. I know everything about that because it's a Macintosh. And it's providing that information back down into Forescout so I can classify even faster. And I'm leveraging tons of other solutions. And what you'll see in the coming slides is I'm actually leveraging what we're doing with Palo Alto's Global Protect, because those that are familiar with Global Protect, and I think Cisco AnyConnect is the same way, is it's an agent that lives on a system. It knows a lot about that system, right? The operating system and other configurations and stuff. So why not ask that agent? Why not ask the VPN concentrator, hey, tell me what you know about this device, and I will leverage that in classification. And that's kind of like going to the power of Forescout, is being able to not only use the secret sauce that's built into the platform, but to start asking and orchestrating across all these other technologies to get that visibility into what the device is. So, like, you look at my screenshot here and I have like Windows, 251 devices. Like, what is that? It's probably made up of like 7 or 8 different conditions, like Forescout's native, classification stuff. And I might be asking other technology what it knows to make it a Windows device.
That's cool. So you may cover this as well, Nick, and might also be a leading question, but a lot of times as you get more granular on how you're doing things in various technologies, it gets to be more of an administrative nightmare / complicated mess. So can you describe or talk to how having this level of granularity has or has not added to the administrative piece from a Forescout perspective?
Yeah, I'll say that building it initially, it takes a little bit of time, it's a little bit of administrative work behind it, but as kind of like the old Ronco grills there, right? The set it and forget it, right? Once you've built this out once, you can leverage this throughout the rest of the platform. So all we need to do is spend enough cycles to get a really good classification tree done. So if we can, without a doubt, with very low, if any, with no false positives, say these are the Windows devices and we add them to that Windows group, that's it. The rest of the administration of the platform is very simple because you're just leveraging like the members of that group. One of the other things that I'll kind of say with this is also kind of like getting into like the Slack community and like the user community as a whole, is a lot of this stuff is shared within the community as well. So these are things like, if you like my classification, policy, I'll share it with you. So you don't have to do all the work. It's very easy to export and share it around. So I'd say whoever's building it initially, yeah, sure, there's a little bit of work, but it's easy to share, and once it's in place, it makes the rest of the product just run, completely smooth. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. And let's talk about one of the other things that I kind of alluded to just a second ago, is being able to make use of conditions that are more likely to have, to have success with VPN connected devices. So this is an example here where I'm showing you a quick sample of some of the conditions that I'm doing for Windows detection on the VPN, right? So if you go back to my original point where I'm separating out of the VPN classification policy from my normal classification policy, what I'm doing on the VPN classification policy for Windows is I've also tossed in this third option to say, I'm going to go ask the Global Protect, the Palo Alto Global Protect gateway, what it knows as the OS of the device that's connecting, which in this case, it knows before Forescout knows, right? Because the device is already connected to the Global Protect gateway. So the gateway already knows that this is a Windows device, this is the external IP address, this is the user that's connected and stuff. So before Forescout can even like scan the machine to figure out that it's a Windows machine, it's already asked the Global Protect gateway, hey, do you know what kind of OS is running on that device that just connected? And Global Protect's like, yeah, it's a Windows device. So classification becomes instant, super instant.
So you don't have to worry about, at that point, Forescout itself tipping over like a sensitive medical device or any type of device at that point, because it's not really doing the probing at that point. It's just gathering secondary information from your network appliance. Am I understanding that right?
You're exactly understanding it right. And we could even limit this. You could even tune this even further to only use passive learning technology, passive learning to figure out what the OS is. But yes, you're spot on. We're leveraging what other technology is saying about that device. So when a device connects to our VPN, it immediately, if it's Windows, it classifies immediately. There's no delay in that. And then the last part that helps out with this as well, and this goes back to kind of your question about not tipping over a device. It is very specific to the agent that Forescout provides, Secure Connector. But when their agent is running on a managed system, as soon as that agent has reestablished a connection back to the enterprise manager or the Forescout appliance, that data just flows right in. Secure Connector holds all this data about the endpoint is running on, operating system, processes, services running, open ports, all that stuff. So Forescout doesn't even need to scan the device. Connection gets reestablished. Secure Connector just tells Forescout, hey, here's a managed device. It's Windows, it's this, it's that. So it further adds on to immediate classification. You can do this with agentless as well. My experience with Secure Connector goes beyond just how fast it provides information back. There are a lot of other benefits related to running Secure Connector when we talk about a remote workforce as well. I won't get into all the different things related to Secure Connector, but one of the big ones, and I probably am going to be, I'm not sure if I have this in another slide, but it's based on its event-based detection, which is where Forescout, the Secure Connector, can actually feed up data to the Forescout appliance in real time as things change. And you know what, I do think I have this in another slide, so I'll wait till I get to that one to talk about it a little bit more. And I think that's, yep. So the last thing that, again, you'll hear me say throughout this whole presentation is how we continue to make use of third-party integrations in classification policies and just in general with Forescout. I think between their extended modules and the stuff we've written with Open Integration Module and their Connect app, we've integrated with probably 15 to 20 different third-party solutions to not only bring data in to Forescout, but we're performing actions to those third-party integrations. And we're also orchestrating actions between two of them, right? So we have the ability to, and you'll see this a little bit later on, we have the ability to take data from one piece of technology, write a policy on it, and then go instruct another piece of technology to take action based on the policies within Forescout. So it's a really smart and efficient orchestration platform when you integrate with multiple technologies.
So that's kind of twofold, right? So it gives you the opportunity, if I'm understanding it right, it gives you the opportunity to, to onboard new devices, say through ServiceNow or whatever, whatever CMDB solution you have, but effectively push alerts down, say to like your SOC to say, hey, I want to know when a new device comes into like this part of the hospital or this part of the bank, right? So you need to, you want to flag to the ServiceNow or your CMDB that, your change management's happening, but also conversely, it sounds like you have the ability to do special alerts like to your SOC and stuff like that. Am I understanding that correctly?
Absolutely. And I can even go, deeper than that, right? So like other examples that we've done in the past, we're still doing right now is we're doing things like our IT team has access to their IPAM tool. Their ITAM tool. Unfortunately, we're not using ServiceNow. We're using some other application, and they use that for their asset management. They can go pull up an asset in their ITAM tool and be like, here's who owns it, here's who it's issued to, the purchase order, when it expires, the memory that's on it, you know, all the stuff you expect within an ITAM tool. What we're also being able to do is to take data from other solutions. So for example, where is this device physically plugged in? What switch, which port, or which wireless access point on which building, which floor? And we're able to pump that through Forescout and update the ITAM tool with that. So we actually give our help desk the ability to open up an asset in their ITAM tool and actually find where it's located in the globe. Like it's located on the 3rd floor of this building in Cambridge, connected to this access point. So we're able to do that and vice versa, and just send it, you know, send data between all different technology. Yeah, I can talk a lot about the different integrations doing that way. But yeah, it's great. So now we're going to get into a little bit of like the policy work that I've done. So what I just kind of covered was a way for us to just make our classification smarter. The goal of it really is, as soon as a device connects, we need to classify exactly what it is immediately. So then all of our other policies can execute just as quick. So a couple things that we did to really improve on how our policies became more efficient for VPN and remote workers. Forescout has this one feature in there. I say it all the time. It's probably one of the most powerful features of the platform. It's also one that is completely hidden and not many people know about. Howie, if you're listening, let's get this moved to the front page somewhere or something. But it's the ability to create your own custom conditions. So if we go back to what I was talking about with like a Windows device, you know, you saw on that the different conditions I had. I think I had 3 of them listed. Like, is it Windows? Is it this? Is the Global Protect say what it is and stuff? You can write policies, conditions, you know, 10, 15, 20, 100 conditions. I don't know if there's a limit on how many of them, but you don't want to have to replicate writing that many conditions across all your policies. So Forescout allows you to create a single one-time custom condition that makes use of a lot of sub conditions. So for example, what we were able to do with the screenshot right here is we created a single condition called Global Protect Connection Details, which encompasses the 3 things that I'm pulling from the gateway, the specific gateway. So the username, the public IP address, and user details. So user details would be like the operating system, what else is in there? Operating system, username. I think username is part of that, even though I'm calling it out separately. But there's some other specific information that we're able to pull. So we can create this one condition called Global Protect Connection Details and just use that single condition in multiple policies. I think one of the better ways I can explain this one also is we have a custom condition that we've written that's called a HubSpot owned device. And that's it. I can use this condition in a bunch of different policies that if, you know, the scope of this policy is a HubSpot owned device, you match this policy. Well, what does a HubSpot owned device mean? It means about 20 different things. I'm not going to tell you what those are, but there's about 20 different things that if you match, you're a HubSpot owned device. So all I have to just use is that one condition in a bunch of other policies. And if I have to tweak it or tune it or update it, I just have to do it in one place, this custom condition screen. It's very powerful. We heavily used it to get faster, or not faster, but more efficient policy flow and logic. I actually have on the screen here, I wrote a tutorial on it. It's a YouTube tutorial. If you want to listen to me for probably about 15 minutes in a very, you know, monotone voice talk about this, then definitely check it out. But it goes over everything. It's very cool. It helped us out a lot.
So Nick, can you make sure you send that link to me as well? We'll get it posted up on our social media.
Absolutely. All right. So this is one of the best ones, and I've already kind of talked about this. Why ask a device directly for information if we can ask another reliable source for the same information first, right? So specifically what I have on my screen here is a couple screenshots. One, the first one with the red box around it and stuff, is showing where I'm pulling in information from Jamf. on a Macintosh system, right? So let's just pretend a Macintosh system comes on the network, it's managed. There's no reason to waste. It goes back to the question that was asked earlier about like tipping over a device, maybe crashing it or something. There's no reason for me to ask this Macintosh device, hey, do you have File Vault enabled? Is it encrypted? You know, what percentage is it at? You know, things like that. When that Macintosh is actively talking to its real management platform, Jamf. So why don't I go ask Jamf, hey, Jamf, tell me what you know about its File Vault status. And you can kind of see above that, I leverage within my policy also like the last time that the endpoint talked to Jamf, right? So I'll do stuff that like if Jamf, if this device checked into Jamf, say within the last day, I'm going to consider whatever information it gives back to me as accurate. You know, within a day is pretty accurate. So I've got policies that will say, is this device encrypted, right? Full disk encryption. And rather than waste the cycles of asking it over a VPN, because who knows the VPN bandwidth that a user's connecting from and things like that, I'm going to quickly query Jamf and just say, hey, has it checked into you in the last day? Yes, cool. Is File Vault enabled? Yes, it is, cool. Then I'm going to consider it a compliant from a File Vault perspective. And I'm not even ask the system. So again, instant answers to important questions like security compliance. The one below that is related to CrowdStrike. We leverage CrowdStrike. So let's go ask CrowdStrike, hey, is the agent installed on that system? When's the last time it checked in? You know, it checked in within the last X amount of hours or days, and here's its version and it's updated, then cool. I don't need to ask the system directly, do you have CrowdStrike or some sort of antivirus installed? So it's almost like it's doing it passively by other technologies are already gathering that data. So I really wish I would have done a video of like, here's a device connecting to our VPN and how fast you can see it classify and then bucket itself into like, it's compliant with full disk encryption, it's compliant with antivirus, it's compliant with this and so on. But yeah, so using external reliable sources is very important for policy improvements. And then kind of the last one is related to organizing access control policies. This is more of an organizational thing, but I think I joke in some of my notes when I gave this webinar before that, you know, if anyone's company is like mine, then you have 200 or 300 Forescout policies, and that's about what we have. We leverage it a lot, and you don't want to have to hunt around for where a policy is at when you're trying to like boot something off the network or you're trying to, you know, go find a device quickly. So what I find worked for us during this time was to really get down and organize all of our access control policies into a nice organized folder structure. So what you're seeing here basically is I've created a top level folder for access control and then subfolders for like IP camera access control, how we're doing USB access control, and then specifically all of our VPN access control. And these are an example of some of the different sites we have. And then I'm showing off some of the policy sub rules here, which is worth, you know, worth mentioning here, which you can see on like this Portsmouth VPN policy where we're checking to see, you know, which ones are company owned. If you go back to my custom condition of a HubSpot asset, right? Is it company owned and it's connected? Yes. We're sending some messages down to Splunk, so we're building some really cool dashboards within Splunk. Then we look for when they've got a company owned and they've gone off network. And then really that third sub rule is really interesting if you understand the icons where saying, hey, these are the not company owned systems that have connected. Send a message to Splunk, but also that new icon that probably looks, that you guys are seeing is the ability to actually boot users off of a Global Protect gateway. So those two devices, as soon as they connected, they immediately got booted off that gateway. All right, integrations, the fun stuff. Again, I mentioned this on the webinar when I did last time. I wanted to point everyone to this VPN integration primer doc, which actually I think they're up to a newer one, a 1.2 or something along those lines. But this is a doc that we have to thank Holly and Andre for putting together. It covers a majority of the different VPN vendors that are out there, at least the more popular ones that people are probably using, and how you can write integrations between Forescout and those in particular vendors. It even goes beyond that. It really gets into some really excellent detail about how you can continue managing those endpoints over the VPN and increasing different visibility of those with things like spans and flow data and stuff like that. I guess this is in short saying that if you have one of these VPNs that you're using and you're also using Forescout, this is a document you definitely need to check out if you want to start integrating with it for visibility and different control actions. I'm going to leave Howie to talk to that later on if he has some time. So in part of that document, I helped contributed on the Palo Alto integration. So we are a Palo Alto shop. We utilize Global Protect. And this is one of the integrations that we wrote. So I'll speak specifically to it, covering some of what I've mentioned already, which is related to once a device connects to our VPN, we're pulling this information in real time quickly into Forescout. So for example, the very top screenshot gets pulled in immediately as soon as Forescout detects a new device that's connected. So we're able to pull in the domain that the user logged into, which in this case is HubSpot, my company, the computer name, the IP address, their IPv4 address, the gateway that they're connected to, username. There's the operating system, which is what I was talking about earlier, how we were able to do quick classification. And then additionally on top of that, which is the second screenshot, is through another integration that I wrote with IP Stack, we're able to take the external IP address that the endpoint is connecting from, which you can see the black bars over there. I'm not sure why I really blocked that out. I'm not sure that mattered too much, but we're able to take that external IP, run another integration with Forescout to IP Stack to say, where is this IP address coming from? Well, in this case, it's coming from Nashua, New Hampshire, which I live right between New Hampshire and Boston, so I probably was connected at that time. So we're leveraging that data to be able to do things like restrict access by geolocation. We can also do alerts by that. Does someone connect from on the VPN from perhaps a country that we don't want them from? Or we can do some other logic related to like velocity. If user connected from here, then they connected from somewhere else on the other side of the country. And we can actually write policies to do disconnects and stuff. All of this gets fed into Forescout immediately as the device connects. So we're not actually doing any inspection on the host. So we're able to control assets in real time as they're connecting. This is just an outstanding use case and an example of how you can write integrations with other technology.
Hey, Nick.
Yes.
One more quick question. It seems that there's some questions being asked on the chat about Fortinet, and I kind of wanted to ask a question based upon that. With these integrations with the providers that were mentioned, and it looks like Howie was mentioning that Fortinet is probably coming shortly. These are basically kind of like enhanced integrations. You can do what you've talked for the past how many ever minutes. You can do all of those integrations out of the box. You don't need to have these extra pieces in place to do all of the things that you already described. These extra pieces are just more information that you can get because you've created extra tie-ins with specific vendors that have I guess more information to give you.
Sure.
So yeah, so I guess I just wanted to kind of ask a question and lead you into the answer with it. So
yeah, no, that's exactly what it is, and really it's their module, their open integration module is probably as a result of every Forescout customer in the world saying, hey, Forescout, can you write a module for this technology we use or this technology we use and stuff like that. And Forescout probably just got to the point where they said, you know what, we're going to implement a module that opens a framework for you to do that yourself. So that's exactly what it is. And I might mention it in a coming slide, but that module allows you to just write any integration with any external source that either has an API or a database. It's really, the possibility is endless on those integrations.
Hey,
right.
Nick, let me jump in real quick here about the Fortinet. Somebody was asking about Fortinet integration, and we actually have a plugin that handles Fortinet as a next generation firewall. And for customers that are using Fortinet as a VPN, that next generation firewall plugin will also help you manage the VPN VDOM, and then be able to tag it. We're also writing some documentation around it. You know, I don't think it's going to be very expensive because it's going to be primarily covered by the plugin already. But anything else we can do to enhance that, we'll put it on paper and, you know, help our customers work through some of the integration. Yeah. So if you have any questions specifically to that, let us know, and we'll make sure it's documented as well.
Hey guys, it's Jonathan. I dropped the public link to that in the chat message there, and then of course, Matt, we'll make sure that it's available right as part of Nick's video, and then part of the PowerPoint and all of that normal stuff that we will provide you.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. I got a couple more slides, I think, and I'll be done. We can answer some questions. This slide is very powerful. This may be one of the most powerful we've implemented during this time. We utilize CrowdStrike. And what we're doing here, in addition to what I also mentioned before about I can ask external solutions. So a system joins the VPN, I can immediately go ask CrowdStrike, hey, tell me what you know about it. So again, there's information you can see in this screenshot that says it's a Windows 10 device. So I get really quick classification that it's a Windows device and whatnot, as well as its manufacturer and things like that, the BIOS and whatnot. There's a lot of good data that CrowdStrike can perform about the endpoint. But what is really good about this, and this is for the kind of the Forescout customers out there, is if you look at the bottom screenshot, you're seeing a bunch of hosts that are within Forescout, but there's something that probably looks a little off, that there's no IPv4 address. There's no IP address associated to all of these hosts, but yet I have all this data on them. These are hosts that are not connected to our VPN, are not physically located in our office. These are truly
interesting.
These are truly off-network devices that Forescout just doesn't see directly. So how are we able to do that? So this is where at least I can speak to the CrowdStrike module. I'm not sure about their other EDR-based modules. Is the CrowdStrike module has the ability to query off-campus devices and pull them in and actually create hosts within the system. And we can then still leverage that data for other policies, like based on the data that CrowdStrike is providing. So we have other policies that will, we have compliance policies that make sure that everyone is CrowdStrike protected, right? All of the company issued assets. Well, if they never talk to our network, we lose that visibility, but we're able to do that with this plugin. So when they come online, and we detect that CrowdStrike told us that these exist out there, even though they haven't talked to your network, we still bucket them into the appropriate sub rules to say that they are in fact CrowdStrike protected still. So
I'm gonna lie, that's kind of impressive.
It's badass. it's awesome. With OIM integrations, you can still open the door up to ask the API for even more information. The CrowdStrike platform has spotlights. It's got other asset visibility, asset management stuff. I'm sure Forescout's working on improving this module to even pull in some of their other features within the platform. But this is just going to show you the power of their native modules, or what you can do with OIM to pull in off-campus data for devices that don't even connect to your network. This is just an amazing policy.
So Howie, Jonathan, obviously CrowdStrike here, but what about SentinelOne or any of the other EDR solutions that are out there right now? And do you have integrations with them as well, or similar?
Yeah, we got a couple. We do. Carbon Black is one of them, and a couple more. I don't think SentinelOne's specifically on that list. We have that all published, and we can share that list with you. It's quite a list. Your traditional McAfee, your Symantec, your CrowdStrike, your Carbon Blacks, and I think I'm missing a couple more.
So one of the things that we're going to do for everyone, as part of our Teams channel that we're putting together, we are going to have a sponsor channel underneath our Teams channel, where we will make sure that all of this information gets posted out there as well.
All right, let me just go through the last couple slides really quick, because I think this thing ends in a few minutes.
Couple minutes, yeah.
We're doing the same with Jamf. I covered this already, but again, you can see from some of these screenshots, we're pulling in all this information directly, including processor type, OS type, you know, free memory, free disk space. We can even leverage the Forescout platform as kind of like a pseudo monitoring, you know, solution to be like, let me know when an Apple Macintosh drops below X% of memory or X% of hard drive space. But again, the point here is that we're bringing in this data from another technology, and we don't have to ask that endpoint for its data.
Yeah. Cool stuff.
All right, so we'll just wrap up with what I had for a couple call to actions from the original webinar. This one, do it now. I started a Forescout Slack user community a little over a year and a half ago. It was initially created as a way for us power users to kind of just collaborate in real time. Fast forward a year and a half to kind of now, and we're, you know, over 550 members strong, 30 plus channels. It's completely user driven. There's customers, partners, Forescout employees. On the Forescout employee side, there's everyone from the SEs all the way up to marketing people and even senior management that has joined this. We do things like daily Zoom calls. We have custom GitHub repos. Definitely join this. It's real-time collaboration for everything Forescout.
Yeah, very cool.
I mentioned the VPN integration primer guide. Definitely check that out. And then OIM integration guides, right? This is kind of a shameless plug here. I've written a ton of different integrations with different technologies. I wrote one initially for Ubiquity Networks, Jamf, Global Protect. I've got some other ones related to some ITAM solutions, Jamf, things like that. So check these out. It gives you an idea. If you're looking to build your own integrations, these guides may give you kind of that little nudge on how to do it. And that's it. That's all I have. Hopefully there's some time if anyone has any additional questions or anything.